Chapter 26. Dinner. When the Spanish was inside the canoe, Friday jumped out of the canoe, and he pushed it along the beach. We soon reached the place where I saved Friday. Friday helped our new guests out of the canoe, but they weren't able to walk. We had to carry our guests to our home. We had another problem when we reached our house. Friday's father and the Spanish couldn't go over the fence. I thought about the solution. I wanted to pull them over the fence. But then I realized that the cannibals were already gone. We could stay outside the fence. We made a tent for our guests outside the fence. We prepared soft beds for them too. When we finished this, I started cooking dinner. Friday brought some fish, and we cooked the fish quickly. We had dinner together in the tent. Friday translated for me because the Spanish could speak Friday's language. I asked Friday to go back to the beach after the dinner. He brought back the weapons which we left in a hurry. I also asked him to bury the bodies of the killed cannibals the next day. He did as I said. I spoke with Friday's father the next morning. I wanted to know what he thought about the cannibals. I asked, "Will they return? Will they attack us?" He said, "They will probably never attack us. The guns created a great shock. They couldn't understand how we won. I heard them shout that you and Friday were spirits sent from heaven." I still worried that the cannibals could return, but it never happened. When our guests were strong enough, I began to think about the journey by sea again. I asked the Spanish about his arrival on these islands. He said that he was on a ship which went to Havana. There were 16 Europeans on Friday's island. They were Spanish and Portuguese. He told me that the storm broke the ship near my island. They saved themselves in a boat. Now they live with Friday's people. I asked the Spanish if they tried to make another sea journey. Of course, they wanted to go home, but they had no tools to build a ship. I showed the Spanish the tools which I had from the ship. He said that with my tools, it was possible to build a ship. I thought that the Spanish and Friday's father could return to their island. They could tell other Europeans about the possibility to build a ship. Together we could go to Brazil or Havana or maybe Europe. However, the Spanish wanted something else. He said, "It will be better if we wait for half a year. There isn't enough food for 16 other men on the island. We won't have enough food to eat when we build the ship." I agreed with him. He and Friday's father helped us expand the fences and fields. We caught more goats. We increased the number of goats to 50 animals. We collected a lot of fruit. Then we dried the fruit. We also started preparing the materials for the ship. We chose a few trees. I showed the others how to cut the trees. Then we formed them into long and thin pieces. In half a year, we had a lot of food. We had a lot of corn. We needed more baskets and pots for the corn. We saw that the Spanish was very good at making baskets. He had a great talent. His baskets were excellent. He also used a special technique to make baskets. The technique was fast and effective. He made the baskets 3 times faster than me. I asked him to teach me his skill. I wasn't as fast as him, but I was faster than before. Chapter 27. Englishmen. We put all the food in my cave. It was safe there. Then the Spanish and Friday's father could go back. They could bring the other men here. We gave them food and 4 guns in case they were attacked again. Then they took the canoe and they went away. 2 days passed since they left when something unexpected happened. I was woken up by Friday at about 6 o'clock in the morning. "Are they here?" I asked Friday. He said, "Not yet, but somebody else is here. I saw a boat." I went to the top of the nearest hill. I saw the boat. It was clear that these people weren't the friends who we expected. The boat came from a completely different direction. I could also see a ship. I knew the shape. The ship was English. I was confused. It was true that I was happy to see Englishmen after 27 years on the island. But I was also worried. The island wasn't near ways of English ships. Also, there were no storms recently. So why were they here? Maybe the men were pirates. Maybe they wanted to hide something on the island. I decided to be very careful. Friday and I stayed hidden, and we watched the visitors for a while. The boat came to the beach, and I counted 11 men. Soon I saw that they were all Englishmen. 3 of the men had hands tied together. The 8 other men took them to the beach. 2 prisoners were calm, but the 3rd prisoner tried to say something. He looked very scared. He asked the men in the boat for something. When Friday saw this, he turned to me and told me that Englishmen also ate people. I told him that they definitely didn't plan to eat the prisoners. I thought that they wanted to shoot them. After a while, I noticed that this wasn't their plan. The men from the boat started to explore the island. The 3 tied prisoners sat on the beach with 2 men as guards. The prisoners looked hopeless. I remembered my arrival on the island. I also felt lost first, exactly like those prisoners. Low tide came soon. The level of the sea was low. Their boat was on the sand. They couldn't move the boat. I heard them shout to each other, "We will leave with the next high tide." This gave us some hours. Friday and I stayed hidden until dark. Then I noticed that the men who stood guard started to sleep. The 3 prisoners sat under a tree quite close to us. It looked like they were also quite far from the other sailors. We could come closer to them. When we were very close to the prisoners, I spoke quietly to them. We were still hidden behind the trees, and they couldn't see us. When they heard my voice, they couldn't believe that somebody spoke English to them from the dark forest. "What was that?" asked one of the men. "I heard something." "I heard a tree speak," answered the other. "But it's impossible. A tree can't speak English." "Yes, you heard something, but it's not a tree," I said quietly. "My name is Robinson Crusoe. I'm an Englishman. I live on this island. I will help you if you tell me who you are." After the first shocking moment, one man answered my question. He was the captain of the ship, but some of the sailors criticized him, and they started a rebellion. He, his assistant, and 1 passenger became prisoners. The other sailors wanted to leave them here to die. The captain said, "The truth is that there are only 2 dangerous sailors who control the others in the group. 80% of them are still loyal to me. If the leaders are caught, the rest will return under my control." Chapter 28, Control. I said, "I'm willing to help you, but I have one condition. I want full control over the ship if we manage to get it back." The captain and the other 2 prisoners agreed, and they gave me full control over the ship and over their lives while we freed the prisoners. Then we went back to the forest. I gave them guns, and we started planning the attack. In the middle of our conversation, we noticed that the sailors who stood guard were woken up. They stood up. They shouted to 3 other men who were near to them. At that moment, we shot the guards. Then the captain spoke to the 3 other men. He told the men to be loyal to him and help him get back to the ship. They agreed, and we tied them and left them on the beach. The other 3 men who heard the shots came back. They saw that the situation changed. We were 5. We had a lot of guns. The situation was bad for them. They also agreed to be loyal to the captain. We tied these men too. We hid our 6 prisoners in the forest. Then I and the captain had finally time to talk to each other. I told him my story, and he was shocked. He also thanked me a lot for my help. He and his 2 friends were hungry, so we went to my house. I showed them what I built during my years on the island. They were surprised by all things which I had. However, we didn't have much time to explore my home. We had to plan how to get back the ship. There were 16 people on board, and we were only 5. First, we decided to take everything out of the boat. We thought that the sailors could send another boat to the island if the men from the first boat didn't come back with the next high tide. In the morning we heard the ship fire a gun as a signal for the boat to return. After a while, the ship fired a few times again. There was no response. Then we noticed that the sailors took another boat and went to the beach. We saw 8 men, and they all had guns. The captain told me that 6 of the men were still loyal to him, but there was also the man who started the rebellion. The captain thought that it was difficult to beat them, but I told him that we had a good chance to win, but we had to act quickly. The captain trusted 2 of our prisoners. They promised to fight on our side. We gave them weapons. We were prepared with 7 men ready to fight. We waited for the arrival of the boat. When the boat reached the beach, the men jumped out of the boat. They pulled the boat on the beach. Then they ran to the other boat. They were surprised when they saw the boat empty. They tried to call their friends. They shouted. Then they shot in the air, but it was all useless. Nobody shouted back. The sailors were confused. They didn't understand the situation. They started putting the boat into the water again. It looked like they wanted to go back to the ship to inform the others that there was a problem. When the captain saw this, he was afraid that they could go back to the ship and leave the island forever. Fortunately, in a few seconds the sailors changed their plan. Now, they left 3 men in the boat. The other 5 men went to the forest to look for their friends. Chapter 29, Plan. We continued watching all the actions of both groups. The 5 men in the forest sat down under a tree. They discussed what to do. They even argued a little. After a long conversation under the tree, they got up. Then they walked to the beach. They probably gave up looking for their friends. We had to do some action quickly. It was important to do something before they reached their boat. I had a plan. I told the assistant to go with Friday more to the center of the island and shout at the sailors. When the sailors heard this, they shouted back. Then, they started going in the direction of the voice. Friday and the assistant continued shouting back. They started to take the sailors to the opposite side of the island. This strategy worked as I planned. The 5 men were soon very far from the beach. This was very good for us. We went to the 3 men in the boat. We explained the situation to them. They decided not to fight us. They became our prisoners too. After some time, Friday and the assistant returned. They went with the sailors very far from the beach. The sailors couldn't return sooner than in 2 hours. We hid and we waited for them. They were very tired when they returned. First, they went to the boat. They were surprised when they didn't find the 3 sailors. They started calling their friends, but nobody answered. The leader and 2 other men started to walk to the forest where we hid. The captain and Friday attacked them when they were close to us. The leader was killed immediately. The second man was injured. The third man ran back to the boat. Then we all went out of the forest. We ran to the boat. The captain spoke to sailors. He asked them to give up. When the sailors understood the situation, they dropped their weapons quickly. We decided to tie the prisoners. But we didn't tie all of them. The captain trusted 3 of the men. We didn't tie these 3 men. Now we were 10 men. We started to plan how to get the ship. After some discussion, we knew what to do. Friday and I stayed on the island. We had to watch the prisoners. The captain, his assistant, and the passenger took the clothes of some of the prisoners. They wanted to look like them. Then the captain and his sailors took the boat. They went to the ship. When they were near the ship, they spoke to the men on the ship. They told them that it wasn't possible to find the other men. When all of the men from the boat were on the ship, the captain showed himself, and the attack began. Some sailors were injured in the battle. Only 1 person was shot. It was the second leader of the rebellion. When the captain had his ship again, we heard 7 shots. It was the signal that the ship is in captain's hands again. I was happy when I heard the shots. Soon the captain went back to the island. We hugged each other. He told me that the ship was now under my control. I was so happy. I started crying so much that I wasn't able to speak. It took me some time before I could stop crying. Then I was able to speak again. I spoke to the captain. I told him how happy I was. The captain ordered his men to bring a lot of food from the ship. We had a nice meal. We celebrated our victory and my departure from the island. We drank expensive wine. We ate pork, beef and vegetable. We ate biscuits for dessert. I was very happy when I tasted this food again. The captain gave me clean clothes. I didn't wear clothes for a long time. The clothes were very light. They were a little uncomfortable first, but it was soon fine. When the party finished, we discussed what to do with the 5 prisoners who the captain didn't trust. The men were really horrible. The captain didn't want to take the men on board the ship as prisoners. They were too dangerous. I told him to discuss the situation with them. Maybe they wanted to stay on the island. It was better for them because their rebellion meant death in England. We went to the men and we explained the situation. They had to choose between a death in England and a life on the island. I thought that it was fair to let them decide. They decided to stay on the island. We put them in the cave. The cave was now the prison. I told them to wait for more orders. Chapter 30 Son. I needed some time to prepare for the journey. I had to think about what to take with me. In fact, I didn't need to take many things. I decided to take my dog, my parrot, my book, and some other small things. I also took the money, gold and silver which I found in the ships. They were finally useful to me. I met with the prisoners again. I showed them my corn and my animals, and I told them about the island. Then I went on board the ship. We left the island on the 19th of December, 1686. It was 27 years, 2 months, and 19 days since I first stood on the island. First, we went to the island where Friday's people lived. The Spanish and Portuguese sailors were very happy when they saw us. They were happy that we had a ship. Now we didn't have to build a new ship. We could go to Europe. My dog was very happy too. When he saw one of the Spanish sailors, he ran to him very quickly. He jumped on him. He was extremely happy. The Spanish sailor was his owner. He was very happy too. He started to cry when he saw his dog. It was a very emotional meeting. The sailors started to prepare for our journey across the ocean. Friday had to make a decision. He could stay with his people, or he could go to Europe with me. He needed some time to think about it. We stayed on the island one night. In the morning, I asked Friday if he made a decision. He told me that he wanted to go with me to Europe. He prepared everything for the journey. We were ready to go. We started our journey. 2 months later, after a safe journey across the ocean, we arrived to London. London was the capital of England. For me, it was after 35 years. It looked like the whole world changed in that time. London was a different city. There were some new houses, streets, roads, shops, parks, and big bridge across the river. But it wasn't all. People also changed. They had different clothes. Women had different hairstyle. Men had different hats and new types of guns. People used new tools which I didn't see before. They had new names for these tools. It was all very interesting. The style of music in the pubs was also different. I heard new songs. I liked this new style. I wanted to sing these new songs. From London, I returned to my town, York. My parents were both dead. I found some relatives. My sister, my uncle, and my aunt were still alive. They were happy to see me. But they thought that I was long dead. So I had no rights to family's money or land. But I could stay and live in their house. England was a big shock to Friday. Everything was so new for him. He saw so many things for the first time in his life. It was all very interesting for him. He liked this new experience. What he didn't like was the cold weather in winter. It was February. Snow, ice, freezing weren't good for him. It wasn't logical to him why we lived in such conditions. I told him that in summer, the weather is much better. I sent a letter to Brazil. I still knew the address very well. I wanted to contact people in Brazil. I wanted to know if my wife was still alive. I wanted to know if my plantation still existed. But I didn't know what to expect. The connection was broken many years ago. In May, I got a letter and some packets from my wife. She wrote that she was waiting for 10 years. Then she stopped believing that I was alive. She married again, and she had a family. But her new husband died 2 years ago. I also got a letter from my wife's father. He took care of my plantation. In his letter, he wrote detailed calculations of the expenses and profit from the plantation during all these years. They both sent me many nice presents. They sent some nice skins and a little box full of gold. They also sent me some boxes of sugar to sell. My wife had also a big surprise for me. She wrote that I had a son. It was great news. He was born 8 months after I left Brazil. He was now a big man, and he wanted to meet me. So many things happened to me in a short time. It was shocking. I wanted to cry. Then I wanted to laugh. All the emotions were too much for me. I wasn't able to be calm. I stood up. I sat down. I stood up again. I walked around the room. I laughed. Then I cried again. When I was calm a little, I started to think about what to do. Chapter 31, Brazil. I thought about moving back to Brazil. I wanted to see my son, my wife, and my plantation. After some longer thinking, I decided to go to Brazil, but only for a visit. I wanted to see if I could live there again. I wrote to my wife. I asked her if it was okay to visit them for some days. With the letter, I sent nice presents to her and her father's family. Then I got a letter from my wife. She wrote that I was welcome to visit them. Her invitation made me happy. I started to plan another journey by sea. I bought nice presents for them. 2 weeks later, I was ready to go. When we arrived to Brazil, I met with my wife and my son. She changed a lot, but she was still very beautiful. My son was a big man now. He was very intelligent. He had his own family too. He had also big responsibility. He managed plantations of all the family. He was responsible for a big land. My son spoke only Portuguese and a little Spanish. My Portuguese wasn't very good after so many years. I forgot many words. I remembered only some basic phrases. But with practice, I started to remember the words fast. After 2 weeks, I could have a basic conversation on many topics. And 1 month later, I was able to speak fluently and automatically. I was very happy that I could speak with my wife and my son. We had so many things for a conversation. Soon after I arrived to Brazil, we had a big party. It was a celebration of my son's birthday and also my arrival to Brazil. Brazil also changed a lot. Many things were different from what was in my memory. Plantations were much bigger. Many people worked on the plantations. I was with my family for 3 months. I knew that I wasn't very far from my island. I started thinking about visiting the island again. I wanted to see the island for some days. Friday also wanted to see the island again. My son also wanted to go. I thought that it wasn't a good idea. I knew how dangerous the sea could be. But he wanted to see the place which he knew only from my stories. We planned our journey. 2 weeks later we left Brazil. We went on a ship which went to Havana. We had an agreement with the captain to stop at my island on the way there. When I arrived at my island, we met with Friday's people. They now lived on the island. I asked them, What happened to the prisoners? Did you eat them? They told me that they didn't eat Europeans. They ate only their enemies from other islands. They told me that when they came to the island, the prisoners were dead. They probably killed each other. I wanted to stay on the island and my son too. I asked the captain if he could pick us up on the way back. He agreed. I saw many children who ran around. It was interesting to see many people on the island where I lived alone for so many years. I saw that the people on the island were very happy. Friday was happy there too. He met a woman who he liked very much. Friday asked me what I thought about his staying on the island. He knew that I saved his life in the past. He didn't want to leave me without asking me. I agreed. I saved him, but he didn't have to stay with me all his life. It was time for Friday to start his own family. I was happy that he found a good woman. I was happy when I saw that they were in love. I respected Friday's decision to stay on the island with his woman. I walked around the island a lot. I wanted to visit all the places which I knew from my life on the island. I had some favorite places, for example the Fruit Valley. I spent a lot of time there. I liked this place very much. My son liked the island too. He often walked around the island with me. I told him many other stories about my life here. We stayed on the island for 20 days. Then the ship from Havana came. It was time to leave. We said goodbye to Friday and his people. When we left the island, I had a strange feeling. I also felt tears in my eyes. I liked this place very much. It was my home for a long time. I thought, I will never see this place again.